in Canada, free, democratic, open country. The Chinese can go to Canada. They can go to study, do research, do business. The journalists go and do reporting. Everything, open sesame.
Right.
But you go to China, many things, you get no access. I said, why do you put up with it? Why? Money, money. When people are so money hungry, what can you do? When your politicians, sometimes your politicians, after they leave office, oh, money, money. They go and work for China. They become their consultants. They teach China the Canadian tricks. So sometimes maybe the problem is not in China, but amongst yourself. How do you deal with your politicians? How do you deal with your business companies? If they are so crazy about money that they are willing to forsake all the values that we hold dear to our hearts, what do? Yeah, of course we should talk to China, but China is laughing because China knows your business people, your politicians are so eager to make money. So I think we have to look into ourselves first.
In the eyes of Hong Kong's Iron Lady, Emily Lau, how has Hong Kong become caught in the power plays of the Chinese Communist Party? How has the Chinese Communist regime infiltrated Hong Kong's society in the past 3 decades? How have Western democracies hurt their own self-interest by failing to stand up to Communist China? And, given the escalating tensions and violence in Hong Kong, what does Emily Lau see as a path forward? This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jekielek. In this episode, we'll sit down with the Democratic Party's former chairperson, Emily Lau, who was the first woman directly elected to Hong Kong's Legislative Council in 1991. She also sits on the board of directors of the China Human Rights Lawyers Concern Group and travels the world advocating for a democratic Hong Kong. Emily Lau, wonderful to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you.
So Emily, we were talking offline moments ago. People call you Hong Kong's Iron Lady.
No.
And you used to be a journalist, and you actually, posed a question some time ago, a few years back, let's say, to the original Iron Lady. Tell me a little bit about that quickly before we start.
Yeah, that was in December of 1984. Just after the Chinese and the British government signed the Sino-British Joint Declaration on the Future of Hong Kong. And Mrs. Margaret Thatcher was in Beijing to sign the thing with then Premier Zhao Ziyang. And then after that, she traveled to Hong Kong and held a press conference at 8 a.m. in the morning to say that she's done the deal. And I was the Hong Kong correspondent of the Far Eastern Economic Review. And so I asked the Iron Lady a question. I said, Prime Minister, 2 days ago you signed an agreement with China promising to deliver over 5 million people into the hands of a communist dictatorship. Is that morally defensible? Or is it really true that in international politics, the highest form of morality is one's own national interest? Of course, she was prepared for it, and she said, what do you mean? Britain has done her best for Hong Kong. We've done everything we could for you. And everyone in Hong Kong is happy with the agreement. Everyone is happy. And you may be a solitary exception.
Really?
If you read George Orwell's 1984, you find that the definition for solitary exception is insanity. Well, just to prove Maggie wrong, a few years later, I got myself elected to the Legislative Council. That was in 91, with a whopping majority. Well, Maggie is wrong, but I know Britain has its own considerations. But I think that was a very dishonorable exit. I mean, they left Hong Kong in a very shabby way.
Right. It's actually amazing. You spent 7 terms in the Legislative Council.
You make me sound like I'm 100 years old, my dear friend. Don't worry, I am.
You have a really incredible historical perspective, all the way from this time when you asked this question to the people on the streets today. And I'm wondering if you could kind of offer from that. You were actually, if I recall, one of the early people, even before this joint declaration, you were talking about, the elections and problems and the way things were being elected and so forth. So how have things evolved to today from this historical perspective?
Well, first of all, in 1984 or before that, during the Sino-British Joint Declaration, which I also covered both in Hong Kong and in London, because I was studying at the London School of Economics in London. So I also covered the visits from the executive councillors to see the Prime Minister. And during that time, unlike other colonies, there was no independence movement, no demand for self-determination. I guess because most people accepted that they're Chinese.
Right.
And Hong Kong is Chinese soil. So if Hong Kong is going to go back to China, they sort of accepted it. But they were really afraid of the Chinese Communist Party.
Right.
And then the strongman Deng Xiaoping, he understood that, and because he did not live to see the handover. But during the negotiations, and he was very firm, he said, yes, Hong Kong will be handed back to China in 1997. But don't be scared, because the communists are not going to come and run Hong Kong. Why? Because you will have one country, two systems. One for the mainland, one for Hong Kong. Actually, it was originally proposed for Taiwan, but Taiwan didn't want it. So you will have your capitalist system, your freedoms, your rule of law, your personal safety for 50 years after 1997 until 2047. So that's what Deng Xiaoping said, and that's in the Sino-British Joint Declaration and in the Basic Law. And the Hong Kong people, those who didn't want it, didn't like it, they started emigrating and so on, because the British did not give us British citizenship, which I have been fighting for.
Right.
Until after the Beijing massacre in 1989, people were very frightened. And Britain came up with this British nationality selection scheme, very insulting. And then they offer citizenship to 50,000 families, which amounted to maybe 250,000 people. These are the rich and the well-educated people, and they got citizenship. But they didn't have to go. They have it in their pocket. If things
just
go
in
wrong,
case,
yeah.
Right.
So that's what the Hong Kong people needed, just in case. So come 1997, there were no riots, no nothing. And in the initial years of the handover, it was okay. Beijing kept its promise. They trusted the chief executive, C.H. Tung, and so they really kept a very low profile until 2003, when C.H. Tung wanted to introduce the bill on national security. Article 23 of the Basic Law, and then Regina Yip, who was then Secretary for Security, and she was very tough. Come on, you have to trust me. Things will be okay. So provocative. And that caused, well, some say 500,000, some say a lot more than 500,000 people.
At least 500,000.
At least, taking to the streets. And then, even then, C.H. Tung did not, like Carrie Lam, he did not withdraw the bill, but the Liberal Party, headed by James Tien, they said, oh, maybe no. They had 8 votes in the Legislative Council. They withdrew. So there was not enough support. So the bill had to die. So, so after 2003, the Chinese government became very cautious. Anyone would. A peaceful place, suddenly, how come you have so many people demonstrating? What's the matter with C.H. Tung? It's completely useless. So they started sending a lot of people here to file reports to Beijing. And of course, 2 years later...
Spies, you mean?
Whatever they call them. They have a habit, because they have different power structures, and they have different lines of command, and they send different people to collect information.
Right.
And so that began the Chinese government's second thought, I cannot really leave you alone. I have to come in because the people I picked, they are no good. And the people, so many took to the streets. So, beginning from 2003, they started tightening their control, and then more and more.
Very interesting. And then this has kind of spilled into today. They were really caught off guard when those at least 500,000 people went into the streets in 2003.
Yes.
It almost feels like they were again really caught off guard when the million and then the 2 million went into the streets now. Do you see it that way?
Exactly. Now, this time, it was really terrible. But I guess Carrie Lam thought that when, I think it's the 9th of June when 1 million people marched, and she immediately issued a statement saying business as usual. They will continue with the vote a few days later.
Amazing.
Yeah, and the pro-Beijing parties, the DAB, the FTU, Regina Yip, Ronnie Tong, all these people supported her. Mm-hmm. I think Carrie Lam had this sense that, what is this? This is nothing. Since she became chief executive, she had survived a number of crises, like disqualification of legislators, disqualification of candidates standing for by-election, enacting the bill on co-location of mainland immigration and customs facilities in the heart of Kowloon, which people say are in breach of the basic law. So all these things, what happened? I don't think there were 50,000 people.
Right.
Maybe 10,000 or less. So she said, I survived all this. She must have thought she could walk on water. So this thing, this extradition bill, it's peanuts. And it's plugging a loophole. And she kept telling the people during press conference, she said, trust me, this is nothing wrong. Let us pass the bill. If we pass it, then you will know. It's no problem.
Right.
So it's this, what you call hubris, this confidence, which of course the pro-Beijing people gave her to, go ahead. We have enough votes in the council. Let us pass it. Well, and she was so stubborn. And she really thought it was good for Hong Kong and backed by the pro-Beijing puppets. So we have this disaster, the biggest disaster in crisis in Hong Kong's history. And I have said, I will say it again, Carrie Lam is a sinner for 1,000 years. I don't know why she is still around. Some people in the mainland said, what happened in the mainland? In the provinces, in the cities, when the head of government, the head of parties there made the mistake, what happened? They immediately removed. Immediately. Maybe they're given a job somewhere else, but they will go. But here, for so many months, she's still around. What's the matter with Xi Jinping? When I was in Canada, I said Prime Minister Trudeau, his brain, his head needs examining. I think Xi Jinping's head also needs examining. Why keep a person there? It's so bad for morale. Even for the mainlanders, people who have been sacked. You say, how come I've been sacked and this woman still sitting there? After wreaking the biggest havoc in Hong Kong's history, dragging down the economy, making people so anxious, people are fleeing, fighting in the streets, tear gas, everything, making Hong Kong world news for 6 months. And she is still around. And all these people who supported her, the DAB, the FTU, Regina Yip, Ronnie Tong, they're still around. Well, it's good that during the November district council elections, they call it a tsunami. So many of them were swept out of office.
Right.
But still, the problem is not resolved. I still keep telling the international media, things are very bad because Carrie Lam refused to respond to the people's demands.
And it's very interesting. We mentioned the district council elections. It still felt like there was an expectation from Beijing and the pro-Beijing camp that the people of Hong Kong would sort of speak in support of that side. That's the sense I got. Is that the sense you got?
Yeah, because they thought Hong Kong has a silent majority. And many of these people are on their side. So they say, now you wait and see. I give them the vote. They will come out to vote for us. Well, actually, if you look at the election results, the pro-Beijing candidates, of course, many of them lost their seats. But actually, the number of votes they got had increased. But just that is not enough because the other guys' vote got even more.
Right.
Because we have a 71% turnout,
right.
which again is unprecedented. So many people came out to vote. Yes, they are the silent majority. They've never voted before. And I think, and it's true, that some of the people who voted, they do not support the pro-democracy camp. But they are so angry with Carrie Lam. They say, I go. This is a protest vote because you are performing so poorly and you are still sticking around. They are livid. And these are not the traditional pro-democracy supporters.
Right.
So they have lost the support of the people in the middle too. And you know as well as I know, in most elections, it's the people in the middle who decide.
Right.
Because of both ends, you have your die-hard supporters. But that's not enough to win. But those in the middle, they swing. Sometimes this side, sometimes that side. And also those in the middle, many times they don't vote. But this time they did. And of course, this time there were many newly registered voters too.
Right.
And they registered because they were so angry. And many of them are young people. So of course, I don't think too many young people voted for them. So, and they say, well, if you look at the votes, this 6-4 divide, 60% pro-democracy, 40% pro-Beijing, is still there, which is also true. Yes, so it's not as if their vote has completely collapsed.
Of course.
No, but it's just not enough. And under this first past the post system, you know, so long as you get it, you get in. But if it's a proportional representation, they will get more seats. But this is the district council election is first past the post. But next year, we're going to have the legislative council, which is not really proportional representation. It's many seats,
right.
Single vote. So maybe they will pick up some seats then.
Yeah, we had one of the legislators actually kind of break down how all that works the other day. It's very fascinating and complicated.
I know. If I go down with you to the street now, we stop 20 people. I am sure all 20 will not be able to tell you how the electoral system works. It's so complicated. It's so ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. The impact of these protests and this whole situation has had seems to me, devastating economic impact. And this is something we haven't covered very much in our interviews yet. I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Yes, I think it is really very bad and very sad. I know some of the protesters, they want to achieve that result. That's why they went to the airport and they did all sorts of things. They want to bring the economy to its knees so as to pressure the government, which is something I can understand. But I think that many Hong Kong people rely on the economy. They need their jobs. So we have to weigh these things out. And okay, even if you go to the airport or elsewhere to protest, I support protests in a nonviolent way. All my life, I have taken part in many protests. I have never supported violence. I have been arrested by the police 3 or 4 times, although they haven't charged me. So, and if they want to do that, and they have their supporters, but if it is really going to destroy Hong Kong because the economy is really going down, down, down. And do we really want to see it at the bottom of the Victoria Harbour? Many restaurants have closed, many shops have closed, and some predict that more will close. maybe more than 1,000 restaurants will close, shops, and many industries and commerce, they say they're dying because nobody wants to spend. People are not in the mood. And when the MTR, for months, they stop service very early in the evening, so people dare not go out at night. And even if you drive, you don't know when the roads will be blocked. You may not be able to get home.
Right.
And tourists are not coming. Visitors are not coming. Many conferences, exhibitions, concerts, many things have been cancelled. This is going to have a huge impact on economic life. Many small hostels and hotels, they've all closed down because no business. So I think the government should see this. And what are they doing? Oh, we have so much surplus, all the money we hand out to you. You don't have to pay your electricity fare, you tariff, and you pay your taxes later. How is that going to help? I'm going to go out of business. I don't pay my electricity bill. I don't pay my water bill. How do I pay the rent? How do I pay my staff? No way. I'm going out of business. Why can't you respond to the people's demand and let people really calm down? You say, no, even if you respond, the radical protesters will not calm down. I don't know whether they will or not. And as they always say, I don't represent them. They say no leader, no platform, no nothing. But I think many people want the situation to calm down. But the government has to do something first. You say 5 demands, how can they immediately satisfy all 5? Well, of course it would be great if they satisfy all 5. They only satisfy 1, withdrawing the bill. But if you would set up a truly independent commission of inquiry to look at why it happened, why Carrie Lam committed the biggest blunder in Hong Kong's history, why the people surrounding her backed her, pushed her to do that. What is the involvement of the Central Government Liaison Office? Why can't we do that? And of course the police say, oh, we don't want to be targeted. This inquiry is not just targeting the police, like which officer used the baton to beat the people on the head. I don't think it will be that small. But of course it will investigate the Directorate of the Police Force and the Security Bureau and the Secretary for Justice, who has slept away in the last few months. So I think we need that. If you declare that, and it must be a truly independent commission of inquiry, I think some people will say, okay, let us calm down. And some may say, I will not accept it. Fine. But then how many people will continue to take to the streets? I think those who are willing to give it a chance to go forward, they will stay home. Others will continue, of course. But when they're in the streets, they turn around and look. Not too many people behind them. Not like the protests that we see now. So we have to find a way to go forward. And actually many pro-Beijing politicians support this inquiry. A few weeks ago, the chairman of the Finance Committee of the Legislative Council, Mr. Chen Kim-po, he was on radio, speaking on radio, saying, yeah, he supported the inquiry. He said the most important thing about the inquiry is the terms of reference. How wide or how narrow? What do you investigate? And he said, well, the 2 camps in the Legislative Council should get together. The pro-democracy, pro-Beijing legislators get together and negotiate, come up with a proposal for the terms of reference and give it to Carrie Lam. I thought that was excellent. That's how it should be. But where are we? Nowhere. Why? Some people would say it's Carrie Lam's stubbornness. Some would say it's Beijing.
So Emily, you've mentioned you've been arrested 3 or 4 times. You've had to deal with the police in that type of context. Clearly there's been a change in how the police are behaving. That's certainly what everybody that I've been talking to has been telling me. From what you know, and maybe what this independent inquiry could really go deeper into, how is it that their behavior has changed so dramatically?
Well, I think that is what shocked Hong Kong and shock the world. Because not too long ago, because we have different discipline services, the police, fire service, prison, ICAC, and so on, and there's always, opinion survey. And police always, many times rank number one.
Like positively, you mean?
Oh,
right.
Number one amongst all of them in the eyes of the public. So how come it has suddenly sunk to the bottom? So actually nobody knew why they turned so violent, and some people allege that they cooperated or colluded with the triad elements.
Yes.
And so nobody knows why. And all these allegations, so you're right, all these things have to be looked into. And of course, I think the people at the top of the police definitely do not want to see that. They don't want to be investigated, but it should be investigated. And also, of course, there are all kinds of rumors about the people's armed police from the mainland have been sent to infiltrate the police. So I don't know. So again, maybe that's why they don't want an investigation, because all these things would come out, the involvement of the PLA or the PAP or whatever. So my answer to you is I don't know.
Okay.
And some people thought they had been drugged or whatever. So who knows? Right. Because they were so violent, beating people up like that. And it's their violence which morphed the whole thing. Because at first it was just a bill. People marched peacefully. Then, having clashes. And then the police beating got more and more, the tear gas, the rubber bullets. And that got it, huge, like this. So it has to be investigated, and I don't have the answers.
It's hard to imagine how you could, get through this without that kind of an investigation.
Yeah.
I was there was even a report that the police, Hong Kong police, had gone to Xinjiang of all places for training not too recently. So so many different theories.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to happen?
Well, I hope so. Now that is where I think the Hong Kong people, especially the so-called the elites, they have let us down. Because there are two kinds of people that the Hong Kong government and Beijing would listen to. Not the masses. Even you have 2 million, they don't care. The rich, the business people.
Right.
And the international community, the foreign governments.
Mm-hmm.
When they decided to withdraw the bill, the Central Government Liaison Office had a meeting in Western and got all the CPPCC members and the NPC members to go there, over 400, to tell them, the bill's gone, we have to support the chief executive. And one of them was the standing committee member of the NPC from Hong Kong, Mr. Tam Yu Chung. He came out, told the media, there was nothing wrong with the bill. But okay, now it's withdrawn or it's suspended. Yeah, you know why? Because Director Wang said, in the last few days, there were 67 statements issued by foreign governments. They counted to the last one, 67, not 60 or 70. So that's very important.
Revealing that they care, yes.
Not 67 bombs, 67 statements. Mm-hmm. So of course they care. And the business community. A few months ago, the business community all came out and asked for the setting up of the Commission of Inquiry. But then they stopped. I think they were scolded by Beijing, because Beijing and the Hong Kong government wanted them to toe the line. They don't want to set up this commission. So they don't want the rich people to come out to support it and put pressure on them. And these rich people, who may not be rich that much longer, they dare not say anything. I think they are shameless. And some would say, oh, Emily, although they have a lot of business here, but they also have even more business in mainland China. So they are frightened. Maybe they are. They don't want to be like Cathay Pacific or others. But it's terrible. And I remember when the last governor, Chris Patten, when he left Hong Kong in 1997, he said if there's trouble in Hong Kong in future, Hong Kong would be ruined in the hands of Hong Kong people. And it's these people. when they see Hong Kong dying, Hong Kong in flames, they would not come out to help. They would just follow orders from Beijing.
Fascinating. There's so many people that we've interviewed on American Thought Leaders this past week that have been talking about Beijing's hand, or the Chinese Communist Party's hand in Hong Kong, encroaching on so many areas like the one that you just described. One of the things that's a bit less known, but something that we've reported a lot on at the Epoch Times, is the Xi Jinping and Jiang Zemin warring factions within the Chinese Communist Party in the mainland, but also in Hong Kong. And this is something that you've spoken about in the Hong Kong context. And I'm wondering if you could actually speak to that, kind of bring that out a little bit for our viewers.
When the thing first erupted, so we had a number of big demonstrations. Some of my friends in the financial sector, we had a meeting and talking, and they say, they said, terrible, Hong Kong's caught in the power struggle between Jiang Zemin and Xi Jinping. Why? Because, when Carrie Lam proposed to enact legislation, and Beijing said, yeah, of course we support this. Beijing had supported extradition for a long time, but for 22 years, Hong Kong government refused, so they could not do it. And this time, Carrie Lam proposed it again, and Beijing said, of course we support it. We got 300 people, fugitives, hiding in Hong Kong. We want them back. And of course, some of them are staying at the Four Seasons Hotel. And they not only did they come, they also came with billions of dollars. And many of them are supporters or friends of former President Jiang Zemin. So of course, and these people, they control many companies here. So they call their staff. They say, now they are targeting us. Next time when there are protests, all of you go out to protest, because it's legal. And we donate money to the protesters, because of course they need resources to buy banners and things. So, and of course, in the meantime, many of them fled because they didn't know how quickly the bill could be passed. And once the bill is passed, they could be and taken back. So, and then afterwards, of course, when the bill was dropped, and I heard that, they've all come back. Now Four Seasons Hotel is full again. So, I mean, in a way, and we understand that Hong Kong will always be caught in the middle of power struggle within the Communist Party. Because we are there, we are so handy, and many of their supporters are here. They call Hong Kong the Switzerland of Asia,
Right. Right.
They love it here. But we are also caught in the struggle between China and America. So that's why when Fox News interviewed me only once, so I asked them before the interview. I said, is it true that President Trump watches you all the time? I said, yeah, he watches us every hour. And then during the interview, the reporter asked me, hey, Ms. Lau, President Trump is mentioning Hong Kong. What do you think? Now Hong Kong is sort of caught between the Sino-American trade war. What do you think of President Trump? I said, have you read the book? Let Trump be Trump. I am very happy if every American talks about Hong Kong. That's what I want. If the president talks about, great. If members of Congress, business people, wonderful. But I know America is bigger than just the presidency. There's Congress, there's huge business community, and civil society. So if they all talk about Hong Kong, all want to help us, super. And some people really love President Trump because they think he can put pressure on President Xi in a more effective way than others. But in Hong Kong, what we want, and I've told our American friends and friends elsewhere, we are not fighting for independence. Don't let the Chinese government mislead you. They have this smear tactic, saying they're separatists and fighting for independence. There may be some, very small number, who want to fight for independence. But the vast majority They just want China to keep its promise made in the Sino-British Joint Declaration and the Basic Law under the policy of one country, two systems. That means Beijing would leave us alone. They are responsible for foreign affairs and defense and leave the internal affairs to the Hong Kong people. But why is it the Hong Kong people, particularly the young people, are so agitated now, so anxious, so apprehensive? Because Beijing is interfering in our affairs left, right, and center. So that's the thing. We're not fighting for independence. And most of us do not support violence. We want the violence to de-escalate. We want the situation to dial down. But to do that, the government has to respond to the people's demand, which is very legitimate, to set up an independent commission of inquiry. It's something we have done many times in Hong Kong. So why can't we do it now?
Can you lay out for me, I don't know if you can do it briefly or not, because this is a big topic, but how the Chinese Communist Party has been encroaching into Hong Kong, especially recently?
Well, I think the Chinese government feels that they really need to come in and have very tight control. So, I mean, they have for decades, even before 1997, infiltrated Hong Kong. Their party members have infiltrated the government, the universities, business, and professionals. So these are...
And the media, I guess,
and
as
media,
well, right?
yes,
Yeah.
And entertainment, and a church, everything. So they put their members there. These are undercover members. Some of them will never reveal their identity, but they are there working. But I think over the years, they decided to send more and more, whether it's covertly or overtly, to infiltrate or to help them to have tighter control over Hong Kong. And the media, you're right, because to them the media is very important. So they control the heads of the media company. And many of the media people, actually, they don't really want to do news. They want to make money. And they have business, or they want to have big titles in the mainland. So the Chinese government would give them that. And in return, they will offer to the Chinese government what they want, and that is self-censorship, control of their journalists. So this is, the Chinese control is everywhere, and they like to set up these clansmen associations, because people come from different provinces.
Right.
So they will set them up and then take them to China to visits and to strengthen the bond. So it is true to say that they have their associations, groups everywhere. But bingo, come the district council election, they lost so many seats. They still have about 40%, but the 60% they cannot control. This is the beauty of Hong Kong people. They like to have their own views, to express themselves.
Right.
They don't like to do what they are told.
It's amazing. This is my first time in Hong Kong, and it's abundantly clear from being, somewhat in the protests, just being in this, talking to people, that this is a very free society, free-thinking society. People want this, I guess, self-determination is the correct term, and it's amazing to see that.
But self-determination, not in the sense of independence.
Right, self-determination in the sense of I get to decide
what I do with my life.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. You've also traveled to Canada and the UK recently to basically, talk about among other things, talk about Hong Kong to the leaders there. Clearly, from what you've said, you're happy with the passage of the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act and these other 66 statements, I guess, that were
67
that were out there. What have you been saying to the UK and the Canadian governments?
Well, I went to UK in July, and then I went to Canada in November, and I was invited by the Halifax International Security Forum to speak in Halifax in November.
Yes.
And this year, one of their concerns, it's like the one in NATO, which just finished their meeting, is on China. And so because the Hong Kong issue was in the news all the time, so they invited me to talk about on the Hong Kong angle. And I told the Canadians that we all have to speak up to defend international core values. It's not a Hong Kong thing. It's a thing that is, subscribed to by the international community. Democracy, human rights, rule of law, independence of the judiciary, personal safety, all these things. And we in Hong Kong, we are so frightened now because we feel that we're going to lose them. And the irony of Hong Kong is we're not a democracy. Everybody knows that. Carrie Lam was chosen by a committee of 1,200 people. But the level of freedom, rule of law, personal safety that we enjoy here for many, many years is much higher than what people enjoy in so-called democracies. You can point them out in Asia, the Philippines, look at Thailand, look at Myanmar. The list is very long. And elsewhere, they have periodic elections, but their people are not as free and as safe as Hong Kong. So I say what we want is for China to keep the promise so that we Hong Kong people can continue to be free, to be safe, have the rule of law, independence of the judiciary, and to develop democracy. So that's the message I gave them. And the Canadians are, because they have 2 Canadians being locked up by China after the arrest of the daughter of the head of Huawei. So the Canadians are very timid. They say, oh, we have 2 Davids there. And then when I was in Halifax, one thing they're very famous for is lobsters. And I think the head of government there said, I just want to sell lobsters to China. I don't know about politics. I said, blimey. I said, well, you remind me of the candidate in the Taiwan presidential election of the KMT candidate, Han Kuo-yu, because when he came to Hong Kong, I just want to sell fruit. I don't know nothing about one country, 2 systems. I mean, I said to the Canadians, how can you be like that? And your prime minister, Trudeau, I said, please have some spine, have some guts, not just to speak out for us, but to speak out for your people, because these are values that your people hold dear to their hearts too. And so many Canadians have said, oh, thank you, Ms. Lau. Yes, our people, our government is very weak. And I said, we should speak out. Of course, I said, of course you should speak out. If you are so afraid of China, they arrest 2 Davids. What if next month they arrest 2 Marys and then 2 Johns? Where does it end? And what I say to them is, I'm not necessarily saying, oh, you should sanction China. Of course, if there are huge atrocities, that we should consider everything. But now, one thing that is very reasonable to demand of China is reciprocity.
Okay.
In Canada, free, democratic, open country. The Chinese can go to Canada. They can go to study, do research, do business. Journalists go and do reporting. Everything, open sesame.
Right.
But you go to China, many things, you get no access. I said, why do you put up with it? Why? Money. When people are so money hungry, what can you do? When your politicians, sometimes your politicians, after they leave office, oh, money. They go and work for China. They become their consultants. They teach China the Canadian tricks. So sometimes maybe the problem is not in China, but amongst yourself. How do you deal with your politicians? How do you deal with your business companies? If they are so crazy about money that they are willing to forsake all the values that we hold dear to our hearts, what do? Yeah, of course we should talk to China. But China is laughing because China knows your business people, your politicians are so eager to make money. So I think we have to look into ourselves first. Well, but anyway, I spoke to them like that. And I spoke to all foreigners like that too. And they say, oh, Miss Lau, wow, gee, You say things that others dare not say. I said, that's right, baby, because I want nothing from no one. After I left the Legislative Council in 2016, I have not had any paid employment. Nobody has offered me anything. Some say, God, the universities, they should ask you to teach or do some lecturing. I said, no, zero offer. No, none from anyone. And I don't care. That's the thing. If you tell them you don't care about money, you don't care about fame, how can they get you? But if you are crazy about those things and you're crazy about women or men, they will get you.
So the Communist Party has been very good at leveraging, greed and these various...
Not just the Communist Party, my dear. Other governments do the same. They have their lists, and if their members of parliament or members of Congress refuse to vote the way they want, they will hold a file there and say, blah, do you want to be destroyed or not? You better vote the way we want. So they're mafia in many places. Don't kid yourself.
Emily, tell me, what prescription do you have for a successful resolution? We've talked about some elements already of a successful resolution for Hong Kong in this situation.
As I said, they listen. The government listen to the rich and powerful. So I think the rich and powerful here have to stand up. I'm not asking you to go and overthrow the Communist Party. You stand up and say, hey, this economic slowdown, all this has got to stop. All this turmoil has got to stop. And the government should set up this independent commission of inquiry. Get the two groups from LegCo to sit down and work out some terms of reference. Offer it to the chief executive and get on with it. What's wrong with saying that? It's something that people have been saying for months.
Right.
And they should do it. These rich and powerful people, they should come out. But they are afraid because they're afraid Beijing would punish them. So, very, very sad. I think if we Hong Kong people, rich or poor, together, if we speak with one voice, Beijing has to listen. But that's what Beijing is afraid of. That's why Beijing tried to cause the fragmentation of parties within LegCo so that they will not gang up together, maybe one day gang up against them. Beijing loves this British trick, divide and rule. So even within their camp, they want to have different factions always fighting against each other. Otherwise, if they gang up together, Beijing will have to listen. So I hope these people, for the sake of Hong Kong, they have to do something. We cannot just let it slide like that. This can go on for another 6 months.
Right.
Because what is the saying? Like a bad penny, they will keep turning up. Why? Because some of the protesters said, I've got nothing to lose. And I have no future to look forward to. Yesterday, even a professor at one of our universities said to me, he said, I don't see any future either. Isn't that horrifying? What is Hong Kong? Carrie Lam has reduced Hong Kong to a city of hopelessness.
Do you think Beijing will ever allow the 5 demands to be met?
Well, altogether at one time, of course not. But I think somebody who can talk to them, I can't even go there, but they should tell Beijing it is in China's interest to set it up. And, they can find the right people accepted by both sides to sit on the commission. They can have terms of reference that the majority will accept and get on with it. I think China still needs Hong Kong. In spite of this Greater Bay Area development and all that, they still need Hong Kong, especially in the financial sector. We have the rule of law. It may take them God knows how many more decades because they won't allow real rule of law to be set up in China.
Right.
So they need us. I don't think they would just deliberately, willingly destroy Hong Kong.
Emily Lau, such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.